Hey everybody, welcome. We're glad to have you with us today on the Mustang Room YouTube channel. I am Kurt.
And I am Joni.
And we are in the Mustang Room. This room doubles as the place where we park our Mustang, but it also doubles as the studio that we use to record our vlog posts, and we're excited to be able to do that. Today we're going to talk about a couple different things. In a few minutes we're going to talk not about a question that somebody has asked. We do enjoy those, and we'll get to those as time allows. But I want to talk about, give you a picture inside of our world as a retired pastor, and walk back while we were yet pastoring and what it was like to be a pastor of a church during COVID and during the shutdown. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Before we do that, I want to get to some thoughts about what it's like to be retired here in the Villages. It's a lot of fun, a lot going on. We are still figuring out what activities to jump in and be a part of. We've been to some garage parties, driveway parties. That's fun. Spend a lot of time at the pool. But one of the activities that we have here at the Villages that's not an official activity, but it is a lot of fun for me. Back when I was 13 years old in July of 1969, some of you, that date may ring a bell, that particular period of time. The Apollo space program was fully in gear, and in July of 69 specifically, that's when the Apollo 11 launch happened, the first manned launch to the moon, and where men would actually be there. And we were visiting with my Grandpa McConnell at that time, and my mom and dad, I tell you, I've learned to love them more as the years go on, and their ability to see some really cool things in life and let us be a part of that. My brother Rex and myself, mom and dad, went to the East Coast, over to the Space Coast, and we parked our little Opel station wagon along one of the causeways, and there was nothing but water between us and the launch pad for Apollo 11. And that gigantic Saturn V rocket, you could see it clearly. And we camped out overnight. I slept on the roof, on the luggage rack, a little kid that I was, and I threw a blanket up there and laid on top of the car and got a little bit of sleep. But there was a lot of excitement for that launch, and we got to see it up close and personal. I remember vividly and clearly when it launched, the rumble, 5 miles away, nothing but water, and the rumble of the earth beneath my feet as that gigantic rocket lifted off. But here in the Villages now, we have some excitement in that all I have to do is grab a couple lawn chairs, walk right off the end of my driveway, and put those lawn chairs down and have a seat and look to the east, and I have a perfect line of sight view to the launches that happen frequently, much more frequently than I ever knew about or expected. And we get to go out and watch those launches. And now the Artemis program is getting set up, and they had to scrub the mission, the launch a couple weeks ago, but that's coming back, and that rocket is one of the very largest, and we're going to, with clear skies, we're going to have a great view. Neighbors come down and sit with us, and we watch Donnie and Sarah across the street, and others join with us, and Barbara, and we get to watch those launches. That's a lot of fun. And even at a distance, I don't feel the earth move beneath my feet, but we do get to see some really incredible things as those space launches are happening in our part of the world, and that's fun for me. And it's fun to have Joni with me, and she gets to see those launches as well. Let's quickly then get to what it's like, what it was like to be a pastor during COVID and during the COVID shutdown. I'm going to, in just a moment, I'm going to have one comment I want to make, and Joni's going to have a comment she wants to make about what we found to be our most difficult moment as a pastor. What was the greatest difficulty for us as a pastor and a pastor's wife during those months? But before I get to that, I want to set it up with this. Those that were part of our church back in Michigan will recall, I hope you recall, that in January, ahead of the shutdown, some very interesting things were happening. There were 3 events that happened to, the first one to Joni and myself, another one to Dave and Bonnie Randall, part of a vital part of leadership of our church, and to my daughter Angie out in Missouri within a very short span of few weeks. Each of us had been pressed into ministry to help total strangers. People who were in the midst of a crisis, didn't know what to do, were desperate for help. My daughter Angie actually came upon a woman who had been nearly killed and abandoned at the edge of the road, just dumped off. And Angie came upon this woman and was able to help her, was there when the police arrived and were able to begin their investigation. And Angie was able to be a support and an encouragement to a total stranger who was in one of the worst moments of her life. Joni and I had an opportunity on a flight into, I believe it was Dallas or Houston. It might have been Houston. There was a woman who, just as we were landing, discovered that there was a great tragedy in her life, and she just began in desperation, just sobbing and crying out as that plane was taxiing to the gate. And Joni and I were immediately able to step into that situation and be a help and to be a ministry to a woman that was a total stranger in the midst of a crisis. I remember the flight attendant, as we were assisting the flight attendant to get this woman off the plane and to assist her. He looked at us with a sense of bewilderment and like a loss as to how to proceed. And I looked at him with a smile to assure him, and I said, "Trust me, we've got this. This is what we do." And indeed, that's what we spent much of our adult life doing, is assisting people. But there was this concentration of that. And I was led then to preach a series of messages about that. Church, we need to be prepared to help people, strangers, in the midst of a crisis. Yes. People who are desperate in uncertain times. And little did I know that in less than 6 weeks after that, the entire nation would shut down. And with this unknown circumstance and this problem of COVID-19. But that placed a unique set of circumstances on us personally, as just individuals, but professionally as a pastor. Joni, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
I can go first.
Okay, I'm going to let Joni jump in here, and she's going to give you a look inside of what it was like to be a pastor and a pastor's wife during that time. Joni, go.
Of course, we couldn't have church services, so we were doing short services from our home, but it was just praying with people and pastor bringing a message. But there was not praise and worship and a song service, and I found myself very, very, very much missing playing the piano and being a part of praise and worship with everybody. And I remember our first Sunday back to church, which happened to be on Mother's Day Sunday that year. Just everybody being together for that corporate praise and worship and back with the musicians at church. It was so wonderful to be back together, and I just realized how very much I had missed that.
Yeah, and let me tweak that a bit, add to that some. Many of you may not know, but Joni, since she was a teenage girl, every Sunday for decades has been seated at a piano, playing and leading the church in praise and worship. That's who she is. That's not an afterthought. That's not something that she just, thought it might be a fun idea. That has been her life. And now, during that COVID shutdown, all of that vanished in a moment. From 1 week to the next, boom, it's gone. And I saw my wife suffering because she couldn't execute that part of her life. She couldn't participate and lead and do the thing that God clearly, Ephesians 2 and 10 for her is to sit at that piano and play and lead the church. in music ministry, and that was gone. And I saw what effect that was having on her. And I know everybody was happy. The church was packed on that Mother's Day Sunday, but there was no one in that building that was less joyous than her about when she began to play that piano and lead the congregation in music and in praise to the Lord. I knew what was transpiring in her heart and in her life. And indeed, that was a tough time for her. For me, it was the expectations of people in the church that I didn't feel like it was even appropriate for me to answer. We were being asked continually about private, personal medical things as it pertained to COVID. Are you vaccinated? What do you think about it? Do you think I should be vaccinated? We had people pressing us hard on that subject. And I'm not going to take moments right now to dive into what I think about that in a fuller way, but people want to know, have you had COVID? For months, even after we began to gather again, have you had COVID? Are you vaccinated? Are you going to be vaccinated? And people were really pressing me hard for that, and I refused. I didn't answer. I didn't give an answer because I knew what would happen. People would then make their choices, very personal and important private medical choices, based upon what I was doing, what Joni was doing. And that would have been completely the wrong reason to do it. These were choices that had to be made on a personal level with a person, with their physician, because every person had their own unique circumstances and what the Lord would want them to do and how the Lord would want them to respond and what part of their lives they would feel it would be okay to share openly with others. There was this desperate need for knowledge and wisdom and leadership, and I felt it was imperative that I stay in my lane. My job was not to be someone providing medical advice. My job was to preach the gospel and let the Holy Spirit lead and guide people in regards to their personal and private medical choices and decisions. It was a very, very difficult thing because I knew I was disappointing people, and I don't want to do that. I knew there were people who were looking to me to provide leadership, and I couldn't feel good or right about providing leadership in that particular area. These were difficult and unique times, and I've said all of this, and I wanted Joni and I to reveal some of this to you because of this. We're retired. We're not pastoring. But those of you watching this video, you're in a church someplace, hopefully. If you're not, get there. If you need help, I'll help you find one. But you're in church someplace, and your pastor very likely went through similar struggles. I am part of a very special club, a fraternity, if you will, of pastors who were pastoring churches during one of the most unique moments in the last 100 years or more. That will be a part of our life story and our resume, our history. Your pastor went through some very unique things and was called upon to and placed by God to help people face a great time of crisis that was one of the most unique things possible. I want you to encourage your pastor, and I want you to go to them and give them a hug, give them a handshake, and let them know that you're continuing to pray for them as they continue now to pastor a church post-COVID. And let me tell you, the church post-COVID looks very different than it did pre-COVID. Yes. The church has not recovered yet. And it doesn't look the same. It doesn't feel the same. So you pray and you encourage your pastor and pastor's wife or spouse and be a blessing to them right where you're at. God bless you. This has been fun, revealing a little bit of our story and our experience, but encouraging you to encourage your pastors. So important that you do that. Joni, anything you want to say to finish up? No. God bless you. We're not sure what we're going to do later tonight. We may go dancing again tonight. We were dancing last night, had a great time. But we'll see what the day brings. God bless you. Yes. We love you so much. and be encouraged
Yes.
in the Lord,
Yes.
most of all. Keep on dancing. Don't quit. Don't quit, church.